Good evening, how's it going? I've just spent an entertaining evening with a group of budding property investors at Elam Church in Botany, so that was good fun. And I'm just trying to think if there's anything interesting or exciting I need to tell you, but I can't think of anything significant that's occurred today. So let's get straight into it. I want to talk about one of the effects of what I've been exploring so far when shame or an event triggers. One of the things that we do that's quite common is we defensively detach. Now what that means is that we choose to remove ourselves from the pain or remove our exposure to the pain that's causing that is being inflicted upon us. So what we do is we detach ourselves emotionally from whoever it is that is causing us pain. So often we will defensively detach from a parent. And I can't think of a simple way to explain it other than that. So what we effectively do is that we start to build walls around our heart. And what we're doing by that is we're trying to keep bad things out. Unfortunately, what it also does is it keeps good things out as well. So when we defensively detach, we start to wall off our emotions, and we will often, as children, we will do that and not really realise. We just become kind of distant, and often it's not really obvious, but often what is accompanied with it that does become more obvious as we get older is that often there are things that I would refer to as inner vows that we associate with that detachment and with that walling off. For example, if your father, or more often a stepfather or whatever, has abused you in some way, not necessarily sexually, but hurt you seriously, you might say, I'll never let a man treat me like that again. I'll never let a man hurt me again. Many times, in extreme cases, those women will go on to be lesbians because they have this inner vow operating, and they've walled themselves off to prevent themselves ever getting hurt again. And it's always dysfunctional. It's never good. There's a huge difference between having boundaries. Right, we need to have boundaries. We need to know where I end and where you begin. And this is you, this is me, this is your issue, this is my issue. So boundaries are good, and because we can choose to let somebody else into our space, or we can choose to go into somebody else's space. But when we wall ourselves off, it's quite a different thing. We all have, this is us, right? And we would normally have a small circle of close friends, might only be one, but say 1 to 3, and then we have a bigger group that the number's insignificant, but that could be 5 to 20 or even more people who we would call friends. We'd recognise them, we might have had dinner in their house occasionally, that kind of thing. And then we have a lot of acquaintances. And these would be, work, colleagues and various other things like that. And so that's kind of, normal. We have a small group of close friends, and then we have an expanding network. And so what happens is, these 1 to 3 close friends, at some point they were out here, and we then formed an association with them, whether we were going to school with them or something, and then got on with our parents, got on with their parents, or whatever the situation is, and they get into here, and then we can choose to let them in. It's always a choice to let them into the Holy of Holies, into our close network of close personal friends. And I mean people, I can't think of one that I've got, to be honest, right now. So I'm talking about people who we intimately share with. I have men and some women in my life at different times who I function at that level with, but it's a choice. You can't impose that on me, right? So that is a boundary that can be stepped over. But when we defensively detach, especially if it's combined with shame and some other things that are going on, it just becomes an impenetrable wall. And this bit here is generally always empty. And so we set up a very destructive cycle in this case, where we're chronically lonely as well as everything else that is going on, and that leads to depression, and we don't know why. Sometimes if this is operating in your life, you'll be the person who is just always picked last, or you'll go into a party and you're the one person who nobody ever speaks to. And situations like that, we're actually broadcasting leave me alone at a subconscious level, at almost a subliminal level. There's something about our behaviour, there's something about the wounding in our spirit that's got this big red flag up saying leave me alone. It's a bit like, to put an opposite spin on it, people who are really sexually promiscuous, amazing how they find each other in a room of 200 people, and there's a spiritual connection going on in that case where they find each other. Well, same with this, you've got this thing going on that's saying leave me alone, and so you're desperately wanting to be loved. You've got walls up to stop hurt coming in, but it also stops the love. And that therefore stops anybody getting into your inner circle, and so you get lonely, and that causes depression, and you've got this whole cycle going on where you can't let the people in to be loved, and even if you could, you wouldn't know how to respond. So this is quite a logical progression that when I started talking about an event or a tragedy or something in our past, whether it's adoption, various things, and then we get impacted by pride and shame being the more controlling thing. So the next step in the chain is that we defensively detach, and that sets up in adulthood, it sets up loneliness, and that leads to depression and ultimately suicide in extreme cases. And I believe that society generally is quite sick. There are very few people. If you think about yourself and you think about other people who you know, how many people do you really connect with? How many people do you really that would drop in unannounced, or that if you were if your marriage was struggling, you'd sit down and you'd share with them openly. You'd know you were loved. You'd know you'd get listened to, and you'd know that you wouldn't be judged. It won't be a big list. I'm picking. If you do have a big list like that, you wouldn't be listening to this. So that's what happens, and that is a problem. So what we're going to get on to next, which I'll leave for tomorrow, so I don't want to make these too long, is there is a logical progression here. So I hope you stay with me. I got an email tonight from somebody who said, wow, it's like you're talking about my life, and when they describe their life, it's like, yeah, I kind of am. But that's cool. That just proves that this is true and it's real. So what we're going to get to tomorrow is, if you've been following this, progression, and it's you, what we have to do is somehow find a way to start to reattach to relationships and to life. And that's going to bring us to what will be a huge issue for many of you, and for a significant part of society. I'd go so far as to say that the majority of mental illness is caused by one thing: unforgiveness. And we're going to talk about that in depth, or forgiveness and unforgiveness, tomorrow. So, thank you again for your time. I'm not going to be, I don't want to be flippant or long. I take this very seriously. I hope and pray that it's helping you. Learning how to forgive and understanding the consequences of unforgiveness is one of the biggest keys that you'll ever get in your entire life. And it involves Jesus, it involves the cross, it involves an exercise of our will, it involves confronting things that we sometimes don't want to, but the freedom that it brings will change you for the rest of your life. I look forward to sharing more about that with you tomorrow night. God bless.